This is the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandez, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show. Hi, welcome to the Christian Circle podcast. It is 2019, and welcome to a new year. So you will have noticed that we actually didn't post any podcasts, any shows in the month of November and December. So what exactly happened was that my laptop broke down and I couldn't record, I couldn't upload, I couldn't edit any of our previous shows that we did record. So we didn't have any posts, we didn't have any shows, and nothing went up in November and December. And in fact, today's show is what we recorded in November. Basically, it was a little after All Saints Day, and I think that's what you're going to hear a bit of the podcast. But we've taken the month of November and all of those shows, and we're going to posted in January, and that month was supposed to be on marriage, so we're taking all those posts and dedicating January 2019 to marriage. Marriage has of course been one of our most popular topics in this show, and so we've got another special guest next, I think in another 2 weeks. So this year we're going to go with a slightly different format. I've realized that it's extremely difficult to get an episode out every week, not because I don't like recording shows, I do like doing this, but we've found it very hard to get guests, and it's very difficult to get people to talk about their faith online. So what we're doing is we're going to do one episode every other week. And if we manage to find more people, we will definitely try and increase that or ramp up the number of episodes. But I think we're at a very steady rate so far. So we have 41 episodes right now that are live, and we're growing at a very steady rate because we've got listeners from all over the world, and it's been great to hear feedback. It's been great to see that so many people are blessed, have some sort of advantage, understand a few things better. We've had a lot of people who've written to us and told us how wonderful it is to hear something that has encouraged them. And at this very special time, I want to thank each of my guests who've come here, taken out the time, in their busy schedules, and have actually put out so much of information, and their books, their links, their posts, and all of the ideas that they've, spiritually gained through many, many years of Christian living. Very special thanks to Charles as well. He's been our regular contributor. He's been here month after month after month, the whole of last year, doing an episode on saints. And we know you've really enjoyed those because we keep hearing a lot of feedback. We're trying to space that out a bit because it's hard for him to get back here every month. And we hopefully will like to hear more from him on other subjects, and you will know he's already published a book, and hopefully we can get him on the show to talk about the book. So that's going to be our format for this year. I want to say thank you to all our listeners. A very special thank you to all those people who contributed to the Gift Miss campaign. It was astounding. We had $1,127, I think, that we raised for the Edmonton Food Bank. Now, I have no affiliation with the Edmonton Food Bank. I've never been to Canada. I don't know anyone who lives there except for Rhonda Parrish. Rhonda has been an editor for a very long time. I don't even know her, to be honest. I happened to submit to her one of my short stories and got rejected, and then later she said, well, do you want to be part of this campaign? And I thought, wow. And so for the last 3 years I've been part of this Gift Miss campaign, and it's been really great. We started off with raising 500, then 700, then 750, 1,000, and this year we actually crossed the 1,000 mark, so we're doing really great with that. There's a free Gift Miss anthology, Advent anthology book that is basically a free collection of short stories that we were posting on all of our blogs. You will have noticed mine. And if you want to read all the other stories and didn't have the time to go to everybody's website, it's all right. You can just download it. It's on my homepage. You can just go and download it from there. And today, so like I said, we're doing the podcast with Michele Faehnle. She's been married 18 years. She's also been on this show as a guest before with Emily, her co-author. But today she's here alone, and she's talking about marriage, 13 tips on marriage. And she has some really great points. So, if you'd really like to listen and learn more, I mean, I learned quite a bit and I took notes. So I would suggest you listen to this and share it with all your friends. This is a very heartfelt show because I think Michele has been very honest about, what married life is like. So hopefully you will enjoy the show. And write back to me. Let me know how you like it. If you have any comments, we love to hear from you. So sit back and Happy New Year again.
My name is Michele Faehnle, and I am a wife of 18 years and a mother of 4. And I am the co-director of the Columbus Catholic Women's Conference here in Columbus, Ohio. And we have annually about 4,000 women who attend our conference. And I also have a writing and speaking ministry with my friend Emily Jaminette. And we are the co-authors together of 2 books. First is Divine Mercy for Moms, Sharing the Lessons of St. Faustina. And the second one is the Friendship Project, which we shared on your wonderful podcast, the Catholic Women's Guide to Making and Keeping Fabulous Faith-Filled Friends.
Yeah. So I did read the book, and it's about saints, right? And we're celebrating All Saints Day in another week, I think.
Yes, we did. We featured in each chapter, we featured saints that were friends on earth. So it was really a neat thing to look at, that these women who lived at the same time on earth were friends, and then they both became canonized saints or blesseds in the Catholic Church. So it was really a fascinating topic to see how having these spiritual friendships can help us to become saints.
In another 500 years, maybe we'd be talking about Saint Michele and Saint Emily, I guess.
Wouldn't that be great? I hope that we just hope we make it to heaven, right? We hope we are saints. Might not be with capital S's, but we hope we get there to heaven. That's the goal of our ministry, right?
Yeah. And part of our goal is living our vocation, right? And you've talked about. I actually stumbled on your post on CatholicMom.com. And you talk about marriage, and I think one of our most popular podcasts has been on marriage. So why did you write this post, 13 tips for your marriage?
Well, it's kind of funny. I've not ever written on marriage before, and a lot of people have asked, why doesn't your next book be on marriage? But when you look at your own marriage, it's hard, and you don't want. Our marriage is not perfect. My husband and I have been married for 18, almost 19 years now, but we've learned a lot, and I've seen a lot of things that have been important in your marriage to have, and important spiritual elements to have in your marriage, and also just common sense kind of ideas from other people, and seeing the mentorship of other people who have had good married lives, and how that can help you in your marriage. So what I did for this post at CatholicMom.com, 13 top tips on marriage, is I reached out to different friends who are authors and bloggers and asked them, what's your favorite tip, or what was the best advice you've ever gotten on marriage or learned in your marriage, and to share a little bit about why, and then also to link back to a full article so people can really dive in, and if they want to know more and get more ideas, that they could really learn more about good tips on marriage for people that have been married for. Many of us have been married for close to 20 years.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. And
in this day and age, the sad thing is when you look at the divorce rate, it's 50 or 60%. So that you make it this long is something to be proud of, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. And it's weird because I remember reading a post the other day, and it said that in Netherlands, I think there are about 400,000 couples that have celebrated marriage more than 40 years. So
wow.
And we don't hear these good things in the news, we hear all the bad stuff, all the sad stuff about marriage, but there are so many couples who do make it, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it is always amazing to look at different couples and what they do to make things work, and how they make things work, because nobody is perfect. Mm-hmm. And when you're married, you see the bad side of that person and the ugly side of that person a lot. So we talk later in the post about love is being a decision, mm-hmm. and a decision you have to make every day, sometimes every hour of the day, to be that loving person and to love that person through thick and thin. But it is worth it. It is definitely worth it to put the effort in. But it's hard, and that love initial feeling, when you're first falling in love, that type of loving feeling goes away, quickly as life settles in over the years. So you have to make that conscious decision every day to love. And that's one of the most, important things. And I don't think people realize that. Especially young couples, they feel like, oh, that feeling is gone, and so I don't need to be with this person anymore.
Yeah, and that's quite sad. But don't you think prayer is important? Like we keep hearing this statement from various people. Families that pray together stay together. So, how would you suggest, or do you think that prayer is important for couples?
Yes, absolutely, and that was actually my tip in the post. I included my own tip because when my husband and I were preparing for marriage, we went to our wonderful pastor, Father Lutz at the time, and we sat down and he looked at us and he basically said, you have to pray together because if you don't, this will never work. So first, learning how to pray together as a couple, which can be awkward at first because prayer is such an intimate experience, and especially as Catholics, we tend to pray quietly on our own. So to open up and to verbally, pray out loud at the time, we were just engaged, but as it goes into when you're a married couple, it's an adjustment to learn how to pray, but it's such a beautiful gift to see what's on each other's hearts, and it doesn't have to be very complicated. When we started out, we just looked up a book online. It was called the prayer book for engaged couples, and we would read it out loud, and it gave you kind of tips and things and prayers, and then we went into sometimes just rote prayers and praying the Our Father and Hail Mary together, and then just praying for what intentions are on our hearts. And then as our family grew, we included the children in the prayer. And also, to remember also to pray for your spouse, because sometimes we get so wrapped up, we've got our list of prayer intentions and we pray for our friends and our children and all the special needs people are asking us to pray for. But to remember to pray for your spouse and to pray for each day, pray that your spouse has a good day at work, and then pray for their safety and their health, and pray for your marriage. And that is a really important key piece because without that prayer component, we know that is vital. That's vital in my marriage to keeping it alive and healthy and keeping me loving.
And you also mentioned that you need grace from Christ Himself to survive in a marriage. I know that grace is a free gift that God gives us, but how would you explain this when you say that Christ Himself needs to be there?
And this is a really beautiful article my friend Chiara wrote, and she lives in England, London, England. She's actually Italian, and she really shared that, when we have those moments, when you're in that fight with your spouse that just will not end, or you're angry, or you're resentful, that to bring that to Christ, and that only in asking Him and having Him there to be there in your behalf, and that is where the graces will come to forgive, to look past this, to get past, because you're not going to agree on everything in your marriage. So there may be some compromise, but when you bring Christ into the argument or the disagreement, then this is really an important thing that Christ can fill that need. And also something I learned, early on in my marriage is that you can't look for your spouse to fill every need for you, that there is a void in our heart that can only be filled by God. And I remember thinking early on in marriage when I was lonely or I needed things that my spouse was going to fill all those needs. But I realized quickly that space is that only God can fill that hole in my heart, and that loneliness is an aching for God. And my spouse is there to help me to get to heaven, but it will not, he can't fill those needs fully.
Would you suggest then, and I know that this is actually a must, that Catholics should be attending Mass every week, but would you suggest that couples attend Mass together every week?
Yes, it is such an important thing to go to Mass together. And I understand there are times in your marriage, maybe with a new baby or this or that you may not be able to, but it's such a powerful thing to go to Mass together and to pray together and to receive the Eucharist together. And we really try as a family, even though it can be sometimes complicated or hard with sports and things, is to make it work to go to Mass together. And, and if you can, go to Mass during the week together, maybe if you can do a Saturday morning Mass, or, other types of prayer together, if you can go to Eucharistic adoration together, take these opportunities of prayer into your marriage. And that is really a gift for your marriage to be able to do that, to be in front of the Eucharist, especially, go to confession together. I know my husband and I always try to, set it as a date, like we're going to go to confession and then maybe we'll go to dinner together or something. Yeah. So to experience the sacraments together is really a powerful thing for your marriage.
Another thing that we hear even in the secular culture is about communication. And there are many forms of communication that are not usually the word kind. So I've heard data that says people who cook together, do well. People who do activities together, who close the day together, these people do well. What is it about communication with your spouse that is important? Because sometimes we say the word communicate, but we don't really do it.
Yes, and connecting with your spouse, especially learning to connect to a man and speak to him, on how he best communicates. I actually heard a great talk when I was working for our conference. We did a development day, and they said men and women, our brains are so different, and a man's brain is like waffles. You think of each of those little squares in a waffle as a different compartment, and they compartmentalize things, and they're only thinking of one thing at a time. Whereas women, our brains are like spaghetti, and everything is all mixed in and interwoven. And that's how kind of we function. So one of the tips that I got from my friend Mary Kate, who actually was on your podcast, and she's a marriage presenter, she said, a psychologist that presents with them said, when you're talking with your husband, women, we like to sit and look each other face to face and just keep talking. But men, sometimes to connect with them is they need to look at something else. So maybe when you're driving in the car, or maybe when you're, he's working at the grill, or so when he's looking at something else that he is focused on, that's when you're going to have a better dialogue. And I found this also, as she told me the story, that this is true. Like some of my husband and I's best dialogue is in the car because he's driving usually and staring at the road, and I can focus and look at him and talk to him, and we can sometimes have really such a great dialogue when we're spending a lot of time in the car. But you have to see what works for you in your marriage and what's going to work best for you and your spouse. And if like for me, I'm a morning person and my husband is a night person. So he wants to have a discussion at 9 p.m. and I'd rather have that discussion at 7 a.m. So we know for either of us, both of those times are not a good time to bring up a serious topic. So this is something we might need to say, I need to, talk to you about something. Let's talk after dinner, or let's, have a phone call in the middle of the day. Something that it's going to work for both of us, that we're going to be able to communicate effectively to each other, and I'm not going to be tired and cranky, or he's not going to want to be up and talking about this. So finding what works for you in your marriage and what is knowing what the other person's, really their strengths and weaknesses, and what's a good time and a good place to have that discussion.
And another thing that you've also discussed is making date night a priority. So a lot of couples, I think, later on, because they're busy, because there are kids, they kind of ignore this, or they just don't have the feeling, and then they kind of put it away. Why is this important?
It's always important to reconnect, with your spouse and find out, why you fell in love in the first place, and to have discussions that are more than, who's going to the grocery store and who's picking up the kids. And sometimes you're all such nuts and bolts that you're not having any good discussions just about life in general. So it's a lot of work. I know this is something we can struggle with because we have 4 kids and we both work full time. And sometimes it's just, we're just too tired to make the effort, but you don't always have to go out on the town. The woman who shared in my blog post, Ginny Coaches, she said, we sometimes just wait till the kids go to bed and have a cup of tea or have a glass of wine together and just take that time to reconnect and make the effort, though. I mean, I think if you get an opportunity, like last weekend, it was homecoming weekend and my son was going to the dance. And so the other parents said, well, while the boys are at dinner, why don't the parents go out? And even though we had our other daughter to babysit, it was really fun and a great time to just spend together as a couple and enjoying each other's company and not talking about kids and carpools. So really taking that time is important.
So you get time to focus on each other, right?
Yes, you need to focus on your marriage and not always your kids or your careers, because it's like everyone says, you turn around and you've been married for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it does, time goes by quickly.
Yeah. So another point that you mentioned is don't play the comparison game. So is this like you're comparing yourself to each other, or you're comparing yourself to other people? I didn't quite follow this.
Comparing yourself to other marriages. Okay. Looking at, look what they have in their marriage, and their marriage is so perfect. Yeah. And I actually, when I requested tips for this post, I got this from several different bloggers, because they said everything might look good on the outside, right, of someone's marriage, but you don't know what's going on inside that home. Mm-hmm. So when you're comparing and say, well, I wish I had a marriage like that person, or because look what they have. They have this beautiful home and they have beautiful children and they have 2 nice cars and, they always seem so happy, or this or that, but you don't know what is going on, and comparing is not good for anybody. There's nothing you're going to get that's good from that by just comparing. Mm-hmm. And so, but if we do compare ourselves, the suggestion, this is from our blogger friends at the Hail Mary blog, is to compare yourself to the saints, right? Because there were a lot of saints who were married to each other and they both became saints. Most recently we looked at Zelly Martin and her husband. And, they not only they were saints, but their daughter is a doctor of the church, Teresa Lassou, and their other daughter, Leonie, is a servant of God. And I believe another one of their daughters has recently, their cause for canonization has been open. And, what a good example. So if you want to look for ways to emulate someone, a saint would be the way to look at their good and holy marriage. But by looking at your neighbors and being jealous and envious of them, it's not going to make your marriage any better.
And I think this is important because when we want to be good businessmen, we want to emulate Bill Gates. When we want to make more money, we want to emulate Warren Buffett. So I think it's important that we surround ourselves with good role models, because even with couples who've not had good role models in their parents, they can actually model themselves on these saints, right?
Absolutely. Or find a couple, maybe it's someone in your parish who's been married for 60 or 50 years, and they have some really beautiful wisdom sometimes on looking at things long term and what's really important. And it's amazing to see these people who have been married, longer than I've been alive. Yeah. And they can also give you some, good ideas on, what makes for a good marriage.
Should it be part of parishes that, I don't know how it works in different archdioceses, but should it be part of parishes where these couples who have such a long run actually work with or be with these younger couples who are starting off in churches?
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful idea, and to have that mentorship. And, I naturally, just happened to find some people that we became friends with who had been married for several years before we were married, that we became friends with, and just seeing how they were with each other and their children and their families. And that was such a good role model for us to see and experience that, to understand. And we were, my parents had been married for 40 something years. And, but it's always good to look outside even your family and to see these role models. And, you know, if you've been married for a long time, to role model for others who are just getting married. And that's another reason, you know, to write this post was to share these little tidbits of knowledge for people that, whether you've been married for 1 year or 20 years, they hope that you glean something from it.
And you mentioned not keeping score, and I will say this is I think I love this point, because I remember in my parents' marriage, it was always my dad who apologized. I mean, you cannot even think there's no question. My mother would never apologize. But it's nice to know that this is important, that you don't keep score of everything that is going on.
Yes, and I love this point. This was from Danielle Bean, who was the brand manager of CatholicMom.com, and I know she's been married longer than I have. And when you think, well, I have taken out the trash every single day every single week this year, or I have gone grocery shopping or I have done this, or I've changed the toilet paper, and you can stew on those things, and it's easy to become resentful, and instead to flip that and look at, well, you know what, my husband has mowed the lawn every single week this year, or my husband has done the dishes, or my husband has gone to work for 80 hours this week, right? To look at the things your spouse has done and to be grateful for that, and to say thank you. You know, that's a really important thing to show your gratitude for those little things, because when we take for granted these things our spouses are doing for us, then they do feel resentful over it. So something little when they come home and saying, thank you for working today, or thank you for bringing home your paycheck, or thank you for picking up the mail, or thank you, you know, if they do one of your jobs. I think for me, like, my husband does the dishes, which is normally my job, you know, that is something that really means a lot to me. So thank you for taking that off my plate. So to be grateful instead of resentful, and not keep track of everything I'm doing that makes me such a great and perfect spouse, and you're not.
And the next thing you said is about respect. So I think we've had somebody who's spoken about this before, and he said that men want to be respected and women want to be loved. So I think respect goes both ways, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that we both want to feel respected in our opinions and what we say. And, you know, part of this tip from Jessie was, she was saying, you know, just because you don't agree with what someone says, you're not going to agree on everything in your marriage, but you have to be respectful and be able to listen to the other side and listen to their points and have a good argument. You know, when you argue, there's a difference between having an argument and a discussion and when you ever talking to someone and they're not even listening and it's only their way and they're not going to hear what you say. So part of being respectful and respecting in your marriage is to be able to listen to their point, and you may have to compromise on things, and that's part of being respectful and loving in that, no matter who you feel that it's important to feel respected by your spouse and what you have and what you have to say and what you feel and what's important to you. And there's a lot of compromise that comes with marriage, and as you go along the years, you realize what's really important and what's really worth fighting for, and when it's okay to just sometimes let things go.
And just so that people would know, let's say, for example, now there's always going to be an argument about whom to vote for, where to send the kids to school, or whatever. How do you, when people have different opinions, okay, in a couple, how do you compromise? How do you decide which road to take or how to meet halfway?
Well, I think this is another example of when prayer is an important piece. When you come to one of those gridlocks where, something like, right, maybe if you disagree on schooling for your children, or, that's something that's going to be really important, and you might be really resentful if you give in without looking deeper into the situation and the choices. So number one, pray with your spouse about it. Get good counsel, speak to other people learn as much as you can about the choice you're going to have to make. And then, but once you make that decision, then you have to stick with it and don't hang it over your spouse's head, because sometimes you'll make a decision in your marriage. For example, when we first got married, we chose to live in Columbus, Ohio, where I am not from. My family's from Indiana. And once we've settled, and my husband, he's an attorney and he has a law practice, like, it's not easy. It would not be easy for us to switch. So it's something that we made that decision, and, I can't, say, well, we should have lived here, or I wish we had moved here. I can't keep bringing that up in your marriage, because that is only going to cause harm and resentment and anger. So once you make that important decision, then you have to live by it and do your best to make it work and be happy for everyone.
And you say don't put your marriage on the back burner when kids come along. How often does this happen, and why shouldn't we do this?
I think this happens in probably a majority of marriage. We put all of our time and effort into our kids and our kids' sports and our kids' activities and schooling, and we spend every moment of every day, we're cooking and cleaning, and our lives revolve a lot of times around our kids. And some of that is necessary, but if you spend all your time and energy on your, say your work and your children, and then at the end of the day, there's nothing left to give for your spouse, right? And that kind of goes back to the idea of making date night a priority and spending time with each other, because when you've got nothing left to give to your spouse, you let your marriage, it just kind of is, like you said, it's sitting on the back burner, and it's just, things are gonna stew, and it's not good things. So it's another, again, that time again to focus on both of you and to put priority on your marriage, and you and your husband, and you and your spouse, and that you have that time together to talk and discuss things. And because people say all the time, you wake up and you've been married for 25 years and the kids are out of the house now, and you don't know the other person who's sleeping right next to you anymore, right? Because you spent the last 20 years raising your children and not having any meaningful discussions about anything. So it's an important piece to reinvest in your time and in your marriage.
Would you suggest that couples should do at least one activity if not every day, at least every week together, where they can grow together?
Yes, and another great thing to consider doing is some kind of marriage retreat, or just like a day of reflection on marriage. I know my husband and I have done several. Our diocese offers a yearly marriage retreat, and you just spend a full day. You're going to talks about marriage, you're going to mass together, you're going to confession together, you have a really nice lunch together. So those are always great opportunities, and the church offers some very nice programs. I've not been on one of them. People speak very highly of Marriage Encounter, or if you're in a difficult marriage, Retrovi is really an excellent program for those people who are struggling in their marriage.
And back to the words "I'm sorry," I guess. But saying the words "I'm sorry," how important is this?
Yeah, that's another thing, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to say "I'm sorry," period, and saying "I'm sorry" to your spouse can be really, really a difficult thing. But this is so important and can mean so much when you realize you've made a mistake, or you're a total, like a total Wicked Witch of the West, to come down and say, "I'm really sorry," and it can smooth over a lot of things. And again, back to that being taken for granted and feeling resentful and respect, saying "I'm sorry" is really one of the greatest gifts, I think, and things you can do in your marriage.
Well, I'll just throw in a few things there. I'm saying this from my own parents' perspective. I think, people should consider that life is going to end. And I'll be honest, when you're staring down a casket of your spouse, all those things, I mean, my mother always says now that, those arguments, all those fights really weren't important. They shouldn't have even happened. And she always says, I wish I had said sorry. So I think, we need to consider that our spouses are not going to be with us forever, and we are not going to be with them forever. And so the sooner we apologize, the more time we have with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful, beautiful thought. And to really, right, never go to bed angry, right? Before you go to bed, say you're sorry. And because there's nothing worse than going to bed angry and then waking up and carrying that into the next day. And it continues to fester, that anger throughout your day. And, when you just say you are sorry and end the argument and start fresh, it's definitely a gift to your marriage. And really that resentment, it holds you prisoner. And when you think you're given the cold shoulder, and that is just hurting you and your spouse, but it's hurting you as well. And you have to be the stronger person to apologize or to accept too when you've been hurt. And I know many people have been very hurt in their marriages, and people have been betrayed, and people have had affairs on their spouse, and I marvel at how they can forgive and accept forgiveness. So that's an important thing to learn how to do, because if you can do it for the little things along every day, I think that's how those marriages survive when they go through a tragic and difficult time in their life.
And every marriage has its ups and downs, right? There's no one who's just got this smooth sailing sea. Everyone's got the stormy seas.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, one thing I talked a little bit down the line is, every marriage goes through a phase of disillusionment. And I know my friend Maria that you interviewed, also, she wrote this great post about, it's called The Season of Hate. And I think it was a great and honest thing, is that there's going to be times in your marriage that you really don't even like your spouse, and you're angry, or just, you feel like you don't even, want to be part of this relationship anymore. You don't want to be around this person even more anymore. And then that's just because you're going through that stage in your marriage, it doesn't mean your marriage is over. And everybody goes through those periods, and it's another time to focus back on prayer and focus back on your relationship and spending time with your spouse and rediscovering, each other and your love. And that happens in all marriages. So I think people are embarrassed to admit it. And I think it was so refreshing when Maria wrote that, because people were like, oh, I'm normal that happens to me.
So you actually mentioned this. Don't believe the lie that you're stuck in an unhappy marriage, or that there's no possible way to reach true joy. So what do people do when they're in this phase of disillusionment?
Well, again, I think, personal prayer is a big piece. And looking at how I'm going to change me, because we can't spend the whole time thinking like, my husband has to change this and my husband has to do that, but instead go deep into prayer and look how I can be more loving, I can be more forgiving, I can be a better spouse. And by spending that time in prayer and changing yourself, and growing in your own personal holiness, that's going to help you just to become a better spouse. And then too, praying for your spouse and praying together about what you're struggling with. I know priests have said to us, you might say, oh, well, we've been praying about this. And he said, well, praying separately or praying together about it? Are you being open and both praying together about this situation? And that is, important piece to that, going back to that praying together and really asking the Lord to intercede and to help there, to really be there and to show you, the answer and the right thing to do.
So we keep circling back to prayer in the end.
Yeah.
And the last, you mentioned pray before sex as well. So go on, elaborate on this.
Yeah, and I think in every aspect of your marriage, you have to invite God in. And I think because sometimes we want to put God in a box and we only want to maybe have God at Sunday Mass, or maybe we want to include them. We'll include them before we eat dinner because, that's okay to pray before meals. But prayer has to be an integral part of your daily life. Prayer has to be, this conversation with God we're having at all moments and all parts of our marriage. So we, this tip on praying before sex was from Sarah Estabrooks and To Jesus Sincerely. And, that's the same thing when praying, when you get into bed at night, praying together, spending that time with, putting God into every moment of your marriage, because he's part of your marriage. It's, it takes three to make a marriage, right? Yeah. It's you and God and your spouse, all three of you in that 3-ply cord. And that's an important thing, to incorporate God in every moment, in every decision, in every aspect. And it's right, we keep coming back to prayer because that's what makes our marriages different from those who don't have a sacramental marriage and don't get married with any faith. That's what we have, this gift of prayer, and God is part of our marriage.
And isn't Christ always with us? I think one of the things that your last point also,
if you are in that bad spot in your marriage, maybe your husband has had an affair, or your wife has had an affair, or you found out they're looking at pornography, or you've just been, hurt in some way. You just feel abandoned. They don't love you. They don't care for you. They're spending all their time on some hobby or out with their friends, and they're not respecting you and not loving you, and you feel that rejection. But to remember that Christ is there for you. And this is, again, another tip from my friend Maria, who wrote on the disillusionment, that she said, the vocation of marriage, it's not easy, and sometimes we're going to have these heavy crosses in our marriage. But even if your spouse has felt like your spouse has abandoned you, that Christ never abandons us, and he will always fill that God-shaped hole in our hearts and be there for you in your deepest, darkest moments. So know that, and Christ brings hope. There is always hope in our relationship with Jesus, so that, that we are to be with him in eternity. And that is really, the ultimate goal of our marriage is to help our spouse get to heaven. Yeah. And it's not to be the cross, right? But to urge them to be that best person they can be, to become a saint. And when we think of if that's what our goal in marriage is, it should change the perspective, on things. It's my job to help you to become holy, and that's a big task. Yeah. But an important one. And when you look at your marriage in that light, it changes your perspective on how you do things. And because I know I was watching a podcast today on, it was about drug abuse, and it was talking about how this woman was saying how, that's all her husband did, is we would drink and party, and, that's what their marriage was based on. But that's not a good and healthy marriage. That's not, you're not helping your spouse to get to heaven by partying and living that type of lifestyle, but instead to encourage our spouses to live, with what God wants us to live, to be good husbands and wives, and to love our children.
One of our priests here, he always says that you don't get married to be happy, you get married to be holy. And every time I say this to secular friends, they just roll their eyes because they don't get it.
And that is a beautiful quote, because it is true. And really being happy, and marriage is, you find out really soon you're not happy all the time, and that is for sure. But it is your job to hold each other's hand up in this world, who is our world is a very secular world. So to live, your faith out, to live out the mission that God has given you, that is your support, that is your rock. And I know I couldn't do what I do in ministry for the Catholic Church without my husband's support, without him helping, with the kids when I do an out-of-town speaking engagement. Even my job, if he can't be helpful in the morning and take the kids to school and pick up the slack where I'm dropping the ball, I couldn't do what I do without a support. So it's so important. And the same I know for him, that if I have to do things, it might be little things like picking up his prescriptions and making his lunch and, those type of little things just to support him in the day-to-day journey that plays out in the end. And then encouraging them also always, to grow in your faith. Like, we started a women's Bible study and we said, our husbands, they're missing out.
Yeah.
So they started on the opposite weeks we were meeting and they were going to adoration and then going out together as the guys. So encouraging your spouse to do those kind of things.
And marriage is the only vocation where you can apply the drowning analogy, right? Where when something's happening and one partner is sinking, the other partner can raise them up and save them. And that goes for a lot of things, like if you meet with unemployment or you lose a child or there's sickness in the family or there's something. Marriage is the only vocation where you have somebody with you who can pick you up when you fall down.
Yes, and that's that quote from Ecclesiastes, right? Like two is better than one. If one falls, the other can raise the other up, and that is true. All those examples are perfect that you gave, because when if my husband loses his job, I need to pick up the slack and pick up a second job. Or when my husband was building his law practice, I worked 2 jobs to help cover the bills. And you can work together as a team. You're so much stronger when you work together as a team than is when you, instead of only looking out for yourself.
And I think if you're always looking for an out, or you've come into the relationship thinking that one day you can just walk away, then you're definitely going to split. But if you look at it as a covenant marriage where this is something you cannot walk away from, this is a vocation that is for life, forever, then you're probably going to do better. I think this is something that I heard with statistics, but I can't remember the stats also right now.
Yes, absolutely. If you go in, divorce isn't an option, and I know many people who have struggled and had great struggles in their marriage, but they said that divorce wasn't an option, and they, it takes a lot of hard work and marriage counseling and, maybe retrovai and even temporary separation, but they continue to work and they continue to pray.
Wow.
And they've made it. And you've seen it in people who've had affairs and, just terrible things in their marriage. But divorce wasn't an option. And so they worked and worked and worked, and it may have taken years. But many times, they do say that if you have a difficult patch in your marriage, if you can make it through that patch, then in 5 years, you again have a very good and stable marriage, and you will look back and, and you'll have a better marriage than you even did before that, whatever happened. So I know I've seen that in friends who've had infidelity, and that they have they've braved it through that storm, and their marriage is stronger than it was before that even happened.
Yeah. So the differences actually can make you stronger, make your relationship much better, right?
Yes, it's good to build on each other's strengths and to use them for, what God's asked you to do in your life. And, it's fun now when you have kids, because the things I'm good at that I can help them with are different things than, my husband is very athletic, and, he's taking my son out on the baseball field and pitching and practicing, but I'm there to help him maybe with his English paper, or, those are great things to have teamwork on, especially with kids and house projects and all those types of things.
So, Michele, where can people find you if they want you to come to their conferences? And
so we would love if you could join us for our Columbus Catholic Women's Conference. Our website is columbuscatholicwomen.com. And this post that we've been talking about, it's been on catholicmom.com, but it's also on our website, divinemercyformoms.com.
Okay. And if people want to get in touch with you, they just write to the website?
Yeah, right on those websites, I have to contact us, and it goes right to my personal email. So I will answer. Happy to do so. And as I said at the beginning, we're certainly not marriage experts or any of the writers, but we hope that it's helped you in a little way, and encouraged you, because marriage is it's hard. It is not easy, And anyone who's been married for a long time will know that. But it is really a beautiful gift to have a strong marriage, and especially to have that faith-filled aspect to your marriage.
Mm-hmm. And how did you actually meet your spouse? I mean, how did you pray for your spouse before you got married?
Well, it was kind of funny. It's a great little friendship story. So I went to college at Franciscan University,
mm-hmm.
and my friend Emily, that is my ministry partner, when she was getting married here in Columbus, Ohio, and I came here to her wedding. And my husband was actually a family friend of theirs, and he had been helping the family with the programs. He was serving Mass at the wedding Mass,
mm-hmm.
and Emily had jokingly told him, Matt, I'm going to find you a good Catholic wife. And wouldn't you know, at the wedding, another friend of mine was talking to Matt, and she said, hey, Michelle, come over here. And she said, well, why don't you tell me about your summer? And I started talking, and she walked away and left me with Matt. So we really did meet at Emily and John's wedding. We got engaged 1 year later on their wedding anniversary, and we're married 6 months later. And we, another really great blessing. When we got married, we went on our honeymoon to Rome, and a priest friend of ours was sitting there at the Pontifical Institute, and he helped us get the Spes Nostra ticket, so we got to meet St. John Paul the Great.
Wow.
And he blessed our marriage. Wow. And I can say that's really been a highlight in both of our lives, that we'll never forget that moment, and we had that special blessing on our marriage to help us start us out on the right track.
So I'm just curious, did you pray for your spouse before you even met him?
Yes, I definitely, and prayed that, God would show me, who that person was and for him and I think that's a wise thing for people to pray for their vocation in life and to pray for their future spouse, whoever they may be, that they may do God's will in their life, right? And that you come to grow in holiness even before you even know them. Saint Anne is I believe, the patron saint of Saint Anne, find me a man, right? Yes, absolutely. That's, if you are out there and you are not married, certainly to pray in advance for your spouse. Prayer is always the answer, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
We're going back again and again to prayer. So thank you, Michelle, for sharing these tips. Actually, we took quite some time, but thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule and talking to us about this.
Oh, it was an honor, and now I think my husband is home, so I will go spend some time with him.
All right.